Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we'll be making a wallet that we actually crafted a few months ago and featured in a previous video. This wallet was commissioned by a friend who wanted a handmade version of his current wallet. So if you'd like to check out that video, I'll leave you a link in the description box below. However, he also wanted a dark version for more formal occasions. For this reason, in this video we'll be using only marine Minerva leather, the same leather we used in the previous version. Additionally, he requested the wallet to be lined with the same leather, so as you can see we have plenty of very thin marine leather on the workbench to work with. To start, I glued two pieces of the same leather together, applying extra pressure to ensure the glue sets properly. I chose to do it this way because it perfectly fits a letter-sized paper which contains a template for crafting this wallet. If you'd like to craft this wallet yourself, you'll find a link to the template in the description box as well. The first step is to secure the template to the leather. For that, I'll be using some masking tape, making sure the surface is flat and wrinkle-free. So with a scratch awl, we'll mark the edges of each template piece, creating guidelines on the leather for making straight cuts later using a cutting ruler and the scratch awl. Once we've marked all the lines on the leather, we can use an X-Acto knife to cut out each piece individually and remove any excess material. Here I started with the small inner slots, but I'll repeat the process for the larger interior slots as well. We'll begin by crafting the interior assembly of the wallet. These pieces are fairly simple to make since they're just rectangular shapes. After cutting all the pieces, it's always a good idea to double check if they're correctly cut by placing them over the template. Now we're ready to work on the interior slot assemblies. Before gluing and stitching the pieces together, we need to prepare each individual slot. For the edges, I'll be using Vernice Heatable Edge Paint, applying 2 coats with a paint applicator before polishing them with Tokonole varnishing gum and a small piece of canvas. I'll also mark the interior stitching that will serve as a stop for the cards in each slot. To start assembling these pieces, we first need to stitch the larger card slot to the large rectangular piece that will form the hidden card slot once the wallet is finished. The slot sits perfectly along the edge of the rectangular piece, making it easier to mark its placement before gluing them together. Once the glue has set, I use a diamond awl to mark the stitching holes before stitching the pieces together with a thin linen thread in a matching marine color. For the second card slot, we only need to glue the sides to the rectangular piece and then attach and stitch the small card slot to the assembly on the side. You can use a wing divider to set the stitching line as I did here, and then use your preferred pricking irons to punch the stitching holes before gluing it to the assembly. Once all the pieces are glued together, we can make the stitching holes along the entire perimeter of the assembly with a diamond awl and stitch the edge where the small piece joins the large rectangle. Next, we'll sand the edges with 220 grit sandpaper and proceed to paint them, applying multiple coats before burnishing. I like to apply 3 coats of paint on thicker sections like this. With both inner slots assemblies ready, we can now stitch them to the inner bill slot to complete the interior assembly. To ensure the glue adheres effectively, we can lightly sand the edges where the leathers will join before gluing them together. Once glued, I'll stitch the upper section of this assembly, then sand that part with 220 grit sandpaper, apply 3 coats of edge paint, and polish the upper edge with Tokonole burnishing gum. Since this part will be highly visible, I'll polish until it achieves a smooth, shiny finish. Now we can start working on the other section of the wallet. You'll see that I already have the pieces cut and prepared. To begin, I'll glue and stitch the two card slots that are closest to the main build compartment on each side, making sure they are well aligned. Once finished, I'll repeat the process on the other side of the assembly. Now for the centerpieces, this is where it gets a bit tricky. Since the middle piece that holds the snaps is also functional, meaning it also includes two card slots, we need to first assemble the lining and then cover it with the centerpiece later on. So I'll start by stitching the lining on one side of the large assembly we've been working on. Then I'll glue and install the other lining piece directly onto the centerpiece, which we'll install later. After painting and polishing this section, we can move on to the small strap of our wallet. For this part, I glued the template to a thin piece of cardboard for added stability. Unlike the other pieces, I won't be punching the edges. Instead, I'll use my scratch awl to trace the template onto the leather before cutting it out. After stitching and painting the edges of this piece, we can install the upper snap on the rounded section of the strap. I'll then apply another coat of edge paint before polishing and stitching it to the center leather piece. To install the centerpiece onto the outer assembly, we first need to stitch the lining on the opposite side of where the first lining was stitched. Then we'll stitch the lining that is already attached to the large assembly to the centerpiece. This might sound slightly confusing, but as you'll see in the video, the idea is to ensure that the linings are stitched to the large build compartment to securely hold the cards in place once the centerpiece is installed. Once that's done, we can install the second part of the snap and finish painting and polishing the edges of the centerpiece. Now it's time to stitch the upper section of the outer assembly. For this, I'll reapply glue to all the pieces that will be stitched in this section and hold them in place using office clamps. Once the glue is dry, I'll remove the clamps, make the stitching holes, and stitch the upper part before sanding it with my Dremel. Then I'll apply 3 coats of edge paint and polish the edges. Next, we need to make a small stitch to close the large leather piece right in the center of the assembly. However, since this piece is larger than the first assembly, we need to measure the correct placements for the stitch. To do this, we can use the first assembly as a reference by placing both assemblies side by side and marking the exact stitching point. Once that's done, we can finally stitch both assemblies together. To start, we'll stitch the first half by sanding the edges that will be stitched together and hold them in place with office clamps once glued. Then I'll repeat the same process we've been using throughout, stitching, painting, and polishing the edges once finished. However, before painting these edges, if you find that sanding has left any sharp edges, you can use an edge beveler to smooth them out before applying your preferred type of edge paint. Once finished with one side, I'll repeat the exact same process on the other side of the wallet. The final step is to ensure that no glue is left between the leather layers. For this, I'll use a plastic bone folder to remove any excess before testing each card slot individually. And finally, here is our finished wallet. Friends, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did and would like to see more leather crafting content, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. I post videos on leather projects, reviews, and more. Have a great day everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.